This week we will be examining work and wealth inequality. This video is brief, and more information on each of these slides can be found on the PowerPoint in the module. The objectives for this week are to discuss the current patterns of income and wealth inequality, and then to compare some of the various stock stories that we hear about economic inequality. We then apply the matrix so that we can understand the historical foundation of economic inequality and discuss some possible solutions. We begin by noting the difference between wealth and income. Income is the money, the funds, which come from a person's occupation, the majority of them. There can also be sources of other funds, such as rental properties. Wealth is all the assets that an individual owns. So this is income with any property, any stocks, minus any debt. What I want to note here is that there is inequality in both of these, but the wealth inequality is far greater than the income inequality in the United States. What is the reason for this persistent income inequality or economic inequality? Well, first we need to examine the restructuring and the changing occupations. Up until the middle of the 20th century, the majority of jobs were in manufacturing, and these jobs had higher salaries than the jobs which exist today. We began to see a shift in the early 1960s from manufacturing jobs that produced goods to service jobs. And as a result of this shift, service jobs are accompanied with lower wages, and we began to see the wages of individuals who were at one point in manufacturing significantly drop as those manufacturing jobs decreased. In addition to this restructuring of jobs, we had a disappearing safety net. During the Reagan administration, there were significant cuts to many of the programs that helped individuals who were of low income, many of the public programs. If we examine the intersection of race with this income inequality, we tend to see even more significant inequality. Women and workers of color are disproportionately disadvantaged by economic shifts because they often are not in the locations where these jobs are available. And so as a result, we tend to see that people of color pay higher costs of living, and even if they are able to secure some of these service jobs, the income that's earned from the service jobs is often insufficient to really maintain a standard of living. We also see that in addition to race, age, gender, and class also influence a person's ability to weather a recession when it occurs, because of course these factors have affected the wealth that individuals have been able to accumulate. When we examine the inequality by race, it is clear that there are significant differences in this income inequality, with African Americans, Latinx having among the lowest incomes, and white that are not Hispanic, as well as Asians having significantly higher incomes. All of this can be explained, this inequality, these differences in income, can be explained by examining the work history of each of these groups and the educational history as well. Women earn far less than men. Despite advances in education and in employment, there's still a significant gap in what women earn to men. And then when we examine women of color, it's even greater. Latinx women are likely to make only 55 cents of what a man makes. African American women, approximately 65 cents. In an attempt to explain this inequality, several theories are examined. One of this is the neoliberal theory, which tends to blame individuals for economic failures, while the Marxist theory focuses more on the relationship between those individuals who own the means of production and those individuals who work for those individuals who own the means of production. It is by examining class relations that Marx believed we could better understand economic inequality. Social policies began to develop in the 1930s to address the poverty that many individuals were experiencing. The New Deal was a result of trying to address the significant negative impact that the Depression had had on many individuals. This created Social Security, aid to families with dependent children. Fair Deal was created a decade later to protect workers from unfair employment practices. If we move into the 1960s, we see the GI Bill of Rights that gave many individuals returning from World War II the ability to increase their education, their ability to buy homes. But importantly, what we have to note here is that people of color, such as Black Americans, often were not able to take advantage of this because of the discrimination, which overt and systematic discrimination, which still existed. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was an attempt to decrease discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, and therefore begin to close some of that gap. In the 90s, we saw the Americans with Disability Act. LGBTQ plus individuals continued to fight for their civil rights, which we saw were not actively effectively addressed for another 2 decades. We then have affirmative action, which was controversial at the onset, continues to be controversial today, and we may very well see with the latest Supreme Court ruling that affirmative action may be removed from educational facilities. And this will definitely have an impact on people of color. If we are going to transform wealth inequality, it is important to understand the history of this economic inequality and the role that racism has played in this income inequality and continues to play to this day. So in summary, this particular module and the discussions that you will be responding to ask students to consider the patterns of income and wealth inequality in the United States which persist for generations, and also to gain an understanding of the various narratives that try to explain income inequality, but importantly, to apply the matrix lens to understanding how work and economy have shaped inequality. All right, so as I said, this is a brief video. A more detailed PowerPoint is in the module. Read the chapter that aligns with this module and review the PowerPoints as well as any videos to be able to respond to the discussion questions.